Just let everybody in. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We're really excited for this webinar. Are your students spinning their wheels on SAT prep? We're going to get started in just a couple minutes to let people kind of trickle in and settle in. But in the meantime, if you could post in the chat, um, if you're a student, what grade you're currently in, and then where you're calling in from as well. Let's see who we have tonight. All right. Hi, Ashika. See a rising sophomore from the DC area. Great. Good time to start thinking about test prep. Another rising sophomore from Jersey. Welcome. Freshman from Jersey. I see Dallas, Beijing, China, Minnesota, uh, the Congo. Wow. Prague, Spain, Illinois. Rising senior from Colorado. Welcome. See. Wow, Arfa's from Pakistan.
Isn't it 3 p.m., 3 a.m. in the morning in Pakistan?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it must be, right?
Yeah, it is 3 a.m. positive.
Wow, dedication.
Huh.
Um, see, yep, from the DR, welcome. Amazing. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Special thank you to our international students too for joining us. I know it's 3 a.m. for some of you and all hours for others as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us live. We will be sending this session out as a recording as well. So you're more than welcome to go back and reference it. This session's hosted by Lumiere Education. We're basically, for those who don't know, we're a one-on-one research mentorship program. So we match high school students like yourselves who are bright, motivated, interested in learning with PhD candidates or postdoctoral fellows, and you get to do an independent research paper in the field of your choice. We have a kind of an introductory program as well as plenty of other programs geared towards publishing and competitions and such. But tonight we're really proud to welcome Rima with us. She's the co-founder of EduFit Test Prep. Rima holds a master's degree from the University of Chicago and specializes in helping students improve their SAT and ACT performance through personalized diagnostics, one-on-one instruction, and advanced performance analysis. Her approach identifies the underlying reasons students underperform, whether that's due to content gaps, timing, strategy, or test anxiety, and she creates a targeted learning plan for each student. And today, Rima's going to share practical insights to help students and families approach standardized testing with greater clarity and confidence. Before I turn it over to Rima, she's going to speak for about 45 minutes. So please put your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. But without further ado, welcome, Rima.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for a beautiful introduction. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this webinar from wherever you are in the morning, in the night, in the evening. Thank you again. I hope to make this super, super productive for you. And you may learn things that you may not know otherwise. Towards the end, I'm going to share two free resources. One is the SAT versus the ACT decision maker, wherein you just answer 10 questions and you'll be able to see if you're a strong SAT candidate, strong ACT candidate, or both. And then there is another one that I've created, which is the SAT score predictor. So if you just take a 15-minute test, you should actually know what range of scores you're lying in. That is something for everybody who's attending the webinar, or anybody who's recorded for the webinar. I will also share this with Kevin so that, when he sends out the recording, it can go to everybody who's also recorded for it. But without wasting any more time, I am going to very quickly get started with this. Can you guys see my screen? Is it visible? Awesome. All right, so let's get started. This is what we're going to do. This is our agenda very quickly, right? We're going to have quick introductions. Who am I? What does EduFit do? What is digital SAT? What is the digital SAT algorithm? What is item response theory? Can you get a 1600 despite getting few questions wrong? If anybody gets a consistent 1300, are each of these 1300 the same? The four different types of underperformers. Why is sophomore the best time to prepare for the SAT? And how many mock tests a student should actually be taking? These are questions that we get asked a lot, and we've actually substantiated with a lot of data points. So hopefully these help you enough to take it forward. But very quickly, getting started, let's talk about EduFit first. EduFit is an 8+ years into test prep. We're affordable, data backed, one on one solutions for SATs, ACTs, and APs. We offer support in online tutoring, one on one tutoring, rigorous mock testing. From a database of 5,000 students, our average is an 80-point rise in just 10 hours of tutoring, and that's a legit data point. We're counselor centric, and we will keep anybody who want you, like parent centric, whoever you want, we'll keep them posted. About me, Kevin already introduced, but very quickly, I'm an alumni in University of Chicago in 2015. I worked at Deloitte Touche and Mahatsma as a cyber risk consultant. I started my journey into test prep before raising EduFit as a test prep coach at C2 Education and Princeton Review in San Francisco. And so far, EduFit has helped over 5,000 students in the last 8.5 years, right, raise about 200 points in the SAT and 4 points on the ACT. So that's essentially what it is. Now let's get started, okay? In terms of test and test optional, today more than 90% of four-year colleges in US remain test optional or test blind for the 2020 admission cycle. If you look at the top tier universities, your Ivy Leagues, which is Harvard, Yale, MIT, or like Ivies, of course, Stanford, Dartmouth, Cornell, UPenn, Georgetown, everything has moved to test required. Many colleges in Florida and public universities in Georgia are also test required. College Board currently lists 63 major colleges and university systems, out of which 23 are private and 42 are public, that require the SAT and ACT score for all applicants, with additional institutions announcing reinstatements for future cycles. So, as you can see, while a lot of institutes continue to remain test optional, the top universities that are there at the top of the radar are actually going for test compulsory. They're putting their testing requirements compulsory. So if you are somebody who's aiming at the top universities, SAT or ACT is going to remain pivotal. Other than that, of course, the major choice like SAT, right now contributes to about 60 to 70% merit-based aids, even in in-state colleges. So that's another reason for you to take the SAT, despite it being test optional. A quick snapshot of the SAT participation, in this year. In the class of 2025, 2 million plus students took the SAT. For the very first time, SAT participation has surpassed 2 million students since 2020, which is the pandemic era. 97% of people actually took the digital SAT. The class of 2025 was first nearly fully digital tested cohort. 68% of people tested through school day. So if you are tuning in from the United States of America, we have something which is known as school day testing, which actually drives access and participation. And 68% of total number of people, and that is 2 million people, actually tested through school day testing. SAT participation is back to pre-pandemic levels, but the performance is not. The average scores remain slightly below the 2019 level. More on this in the slides to come. So, why is it that SAT is coming back, and a lot of people are going back to testing policy? Okay, now the most important thing is when SAT and ACT were taken out of consideration, the major thing that was a reason whether you'd get into college or not, besides a holistic profile, was a GPA, right? Now, you have to understand that initially, when COVID hit in, the pandemic hit in, we thought that GPA would be an accurate benchmark of a student's performance. But as time went by, we realized that GPA can actually be influenced by a lot of things like teacher expectations, school grading policies, homework weighing, participation points, and retake opportunities. But the SAT or the ACT actually removes those variables completely. And there is no extra credit given, no participation points given, no teacher support given, no second chances given. Instead, in one sitting, the student is expected to perform under strict time constraints. Hence, SAT strips away the local grading differences and places every student on the same scale. Just so you know, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was only and only test optional for 1 year. The 1 year of pandemic, which is the fall of 2020, is when it was test optional. From 2021, despite in the midst of COVID, they actually went test compulsory. And that should talk about the importance of SAT. So, in general, GPA rewards completion, homework, effort, participation, retakes. SAT rewards precision, speed, execution, accuracy, consistency. And hence, it's important that you take the SAT. But to take the SAT, you first need to understand what is the SAT algorithm. How can you beat this algorithm? How can you do something to, get the perfect score? Just to give you a quick snapshot of what the digital SAT looks like, the current digital SAT is 1600 points, 800 math, and 800 English. It is an adaptive exam, but it is a section wise adaptive exam. Unlike the counterparts of GRE or unlike the counterpart GMAT, where there is an easy level question and you get it correct and you go to the harder level and then you go to the more harder level, SAT is section wise adaptive. There is a baseline section and then there is an easy or hard section. More on this in the next slide. The SAT has, of course, significantly reduced its time. So now it's only 134 minutes, unlike the previous SAT, which was a paper pen based SAT. And of course, it's much, much easier to crack SAT because the English, which was the problematic area for a lot of people, has now kind of improved significantly. Now, let's first understand what happens and what does the SAT comprises of. The SAT comprises of two sections, SAT English and SAT Math. SAT English comprises of two further sections, which is in SAT Reading, English Reading, and English Writing. There are four submodules of this submodules, which is information and ideas, which comprises of 26% of the test, which is 12 to 14 questions, which will include main idea, summary, command of evidence, inference kind of questions. Craft and structure, which is 28% of the test, which is 13 to 15 questions, which talks about vocabulary in context and cross-text references. Expression of ideas, which is 20% of the test, which is 8 to 12 questions, which includes transitions and note taking. And of course, standard English conventions, which is 26% of the test, which is 11 to 15 questions, which includes boundaries. Out of all of these, expression of ideas and standard English conventions are actually grammar, and this part is reading, which means approximately 46% of the SAT is grammar and the remaining 54% is reading. Thus, if you can get your grammar straight, which is the easiest to fix, you can actually get 50% of them all correct. With the SAT math module, there are two modules, 22 questions, 35 minutes each. The two larger chunks of modules that are there are algebra and advanced math. Algebra is 35% of the test, and so is advanced math, each of them having 13 to 15 questions each. The third the third type is 15 and 15 each, which is problem solving and data analysis, and geometry and trigonometry. Problem solving and data analysis is considered to be the second hardest module because there are concepts of statistics that you possibly don't learn in your sophomore or junior year. Trigonometry, the reason I state this as hardest is not because conceptually it's harder, but most US students do geometry at the end of their middle school, which means by the time they take this in their sophomore or junior year, they're fairly rusty, right? And that kind of causes the highest score drop, is what my observation is. Now, let's first understand how does the SAT algorithm work. The SAT algorithm, whether it's English or math, has two sections. Let's talk about English. Each of the sections has 27 questions. Section 1 is known as the baseline module. The baseline module remains consistent across the international or the domestic domain, meaning if you are in the United States of America, anybody in any part of the United States of America will have the same baseline module. So somebody in New York, I'm in California, somebody in Georgia, wherever it is that you're tuning in from, your baseline module remains the same. Similarly, for the international belt, Pakistan, Congo, wherever you are, the baseline module remains the same. But the baseline module for the United States of America and international are separate. At the same level, but separate. The questions are separate. Okay. Now you need to cross a certain number of questions to go into the second section. That number of questions is known as the threshold. The threshold for the digital SAT for English section is set to 17 to 19 questions. It's an absolute number, but it is in this range. So let's assume that our threshold is set to 17 questions, which means if a student gets 18 or more correct questions in the baseline section, they would go to the harder section 2. If they get 17 or lower correct questions, they would go to the easier section 2. Okay. This is how it is. The baseline section will have 6 hard, 12 medium, and 9 easy questions. The easier section, if you end up going to, will have 11 easy, 12 medium, 5 hard questions. And of course, the harder section will have 11 hard, 12 medium, and 5 easy questions. A good and an important thing to note here is that the number of easy and hard questions have only been flipped here. So the 11 easy become 11 hard, and the 5 hard become 5 easy. Depending on which module you are into, the mediums remain the same. Okay. Similarly, for math, this is essentially what it is. The baseline module will have 4 hard, 12 medium, 6 easy questions. And the easy section, if you end up crossing the threshold is, by the way, 13 to 16 questions, assuming it's 15. So if you get 16 or higher, you go to the harder section where you would get 7 hard, 12 medium, and 3 easy questions. If you go to the easy sections, you would get 7 easy, 12 medium, and 3 hard questions. Okay. You would come back and ask me, is it even important to go to the easier section, or is it even important to go to the harder section, or what is the importance? The most important thing to understand here is that the SAT not only takes into consideration the number of questions that you get correct, but also the level of questions that you get correct. This way of grading is known as IRT, or item response theory scoring. What it does is internally, they have characteristics associated with every question. For example, difficulty of solving the question, how long did the student take, what is the sample set, etc., etc. And they recalibrate it, saying this is an easy question, this is a medium question, this is a hard question. And then they associate parameters with it. Simply put, if I had to explain this easily, for every easy level question, you would get 1 point. For every medium level question, you would get 2 points. And for every hard level question that you get correct, you would get 3 points. There are no missed points for any incorrect or missed questions, right? So if you go to the harder section, you get an opportunity to do more hard questions. And thus, what you're getting here is 7 times 3, which is 21, plus 12 times 2, which is 24. What is 22? 21 plus 24, which is 55. And 3 times 1, which is 3. So 55 times 8 plus 3 is 58 points. Vis-a-vis, what you would get here is 7 times 1, which is 7. 12 times 2 is 24, and 3 times 3 is 9. So 24 plus 9 is 33. 33 plus 7 is 40. 40 points here versus 55 versus 58 points here. That's the difference that you would get, and those are the number of points that you get differently if you went to the harder section. And thus it's imperative that not only you cross the baseline and the threshold to go to the harder section, but also do well on the harder section to be able to score higher. Okay. That is your IRT. Just to give you a simple example, let's take 2 students over here. Okay. There is a student 1 who've gotten the exact number of questions correct, but student 1 has gotten 16 correct, 16 easy questions correct, 20 medium questions correct, and 2 hard questions correct. Versus student 2 has gotten 10 hard questions correct, 20 medium questions correct, and 2 easy questions correct. This student has actually scored 38 on 54 questions correct, and this student has scored 32 on 54 questions correct. But this person's score is 590 despite getting 4 points higher than this one, and this person scores actually 680 on 800. This is a snapshot of a real person, 2 people who have scored this in real time. Why did this person score higher despite getting the less number of questions correct? Because this is 10 times 3, which is 30, plus 20 times 2, which is 20, 30, 40. So 30 plus 20, 50. And 2 times 1 is 2. So 50, sorry, 10 times 3, yeah, 52 over here. Versus this person is 16 times 1, 16, plus 20 times 2, which is 40. 40 plus 16, 56 plus 2. So this number is kind of much much higher, and because the student kind of got more number of hard questions correct, they got a higher score and a significantly higher score. This is just an example of IRT, a real time example. So this is essentially how the algorithm works. And now that you've realized the algorithm kind of works this way, let's understand, are all the scores same? Like, let's say I have a student A, a student B, and a student C. Are these scores same? Like, visually when you see, are these scores the same? Well, my answer is absolutely not. What US families and US students see is that, oh, this student got 1300, this student got 1300, this student got 1300. What we see is that, are there accuracy patterns? There are concepts that are being missed. Is there a timing or a pacing issue? Is there a question difficulty or a kind of question that the student is struggling on the most? Or is the module movement a problem? The reality is the score tells you where the student is. A score report tells you why they are there and what to do next. Bottom takeaway, the goal isn't to raise just the score, it is to understand the story behind it. So, if all 1300s are not the same, then what is the difference between each of these 1300s? Let's look at it. Before we even get to it with actual solutions, what I want to do is make you guys understand, if you're, especially if you are a rising senior and tuning in, is that there are only four, and essentially only four types of errors that any student makes on the SAT: knowledge error, timing error, strategy error, and anxiety error. Knowledge error means the student doesn't know how to solve the problem. You don't have the knowledge that requires you to solve the problem, and hence it's a knowledge problem. The strategy error or strategy gap, which is a third type of gap, is you have the knowledge that you require to kind of get in and to solve the question, but you don't know how to get to the answer effectively. So you're probably using a longer time, you're using things, you're not strategizing it right. The third type of error is timing error. It could be one or the two things. You get you get caught on questions for a very long time, and thus you would experience that, towards the end you're losing time, or you are kind of making issues on a certain types of questions and you're losing time. And the fourth, and the ones that are there, are is the anxiety gap, wherein you're just super pressurized with respect to the time, with respect to just the exam day scenario, and you're anxious. What we've realized is the biggest kind of gap that any student kind of encounters is this timing gap. Timing gap is, again, we discovered the second largest gap is the strategy gap. The third largest gap is the knowledge gap. And the anxiety gap is the fourth largest gap. Remember, these gaps may sometimes exist standalone, and sometimes they may coexist together. Most likely, knowledge and strategy gap feed into timing gap. So, if there is a strategy gap, you will have a timing gap. Because, of course, if you don't know how to work through something efficiently, you're going to miss on time. If there is a knowledge gap, you don't have the knowledge of what it takes to solve a question, you're going to again have problems and have a timing gap, right? And anxiety is just check, if you're short on time, there is a knowledge gap, there's strategy gap, you are going to be anxious. So yes, these exist as one of two or one of three together. Now, how do you identify these gaps? This is something that I really wanted to show you guys, and hence I will share another screen of mine. Just give me 1 second. This one. Do you see my screen here?
Yeah, that looks good.
Awesome. So what I've done is I have pulled up reports of a couple of my students who've taken a test, and all of these are in the same score range. Okay, so there is Adwaitya who scored 1300. There's Katya here who's got a 1320. There is Ramin here who is a 1320 again, and then there is Alicia here. Just give it a second. who is a 1330. So if you can see, everybody is in that 1300 range, okay? But I'll show you how their errors differ from one another. But before I make you understand that, let's first try to understand how do you read these reports. These reports are generated out of the EduFit test that you do with us, okay? It tells you your total score, it gives you your reading, writing score, and your math score. It gives you the number of correct and incorrect questions, gives you your accuracy. How much is your accuracy? Gives you difficulty level, meaning, whether it's very easy, easy, medium, hard, very hard. Gives you sectional scores, sectional accuracies over here, okay? And it gives you, and it gives you further, like if I want to go down at a granular level, I can say, okay, in section one, the student got these many questions correct and correct. This is his sectional accuracy. These are his easy, medium, and hard. And these are the concepts that he's struggling with. So this is a further unit by unit bifurcation of, okay, if I'm looking at advanced math example, what in advanced math am I struggling with? Is it polynomials? Is it quadratic equations? What is it? Okay, so this is what I can find out for every of these tests. And the most important thing, which I think is brilliant, is I can find out at one shot in a tabularized format which question, like what is the tag, what is the difficulty level, what is the status, and the time spent per question. Now let's first understand what is knowledge gap, what is strategy gap, what is timing gap. Let's look at Advait here, okay? Now Advait here has actually gotten a 630. So has Alicia, 650, about the same score, right? 670, around 20, 30 points difference here and there. Now let's look at Advait. His section one is for English is 23 on 27, which means the students only missed 4 questions. The threshold for this section was 17. So if he got 18 or higher, he went to the harder section. So he's actually gone to the harder section. When I click this, you see, there are only two things that he's finding himself challenged on. One is rhetorical synthesis and words in context. The rest, everything is good. So you think, oh, this is a good student. Now switch to section number two. Look at the number of reds he has. 17 correct, 10 incorrect, 62.96% accuracy. These are all the reds. It's the same student. Some of these are easy, some of these are medium, some of these are hard. This is a typical graph of a student who has a knowledge error. The 1300 is irrespective of whether he's gotten it correct or not gotten it correct. What it means is, in the SAT terms from where I come from, we call this as a winging it error. I look at a question, I look at the passage, and I pick the answer choice that sounds the most correct to me, not strategically. I don't take a pause to think what is the right way to find this. I just pick something which sounds correct to me. This is not using knowledge. You do not have the knowledge, and hence your graph looks so different from each other. You can typically see this right here and this one. This is what a knowledge error looks like. But on the other hand, we have Katya here. Okay, hers is 670. She's gotten 22 on 27 and 22 on 27, both the sections. The cutoff here or the threshold here is actually 18 correct questions. So 19 or more, she would have gotten to the hard section. She's actually gone to the hard section here. But look at this. If you look at her graph, the three things that she's struggling with is boundaries, transitions, and rhetorical synthesis. And the second one here is also essentially the same. Rhetorical synthesis, transitions, form, sense, and structure. These are all grammar. This is a very typical example of a strategy error. Why? Because the knowledge is intact. I could just see this one-off thing here. The rest of section 2 coincides with section 1. So for this particular student, I don't want to impart knowledge to her. I actually want to impart strategy to her, because there are only 3 things that she is missing out on, and that is this, right? So this is what a strategy error looks like. And if you are somebody who's stuck at a certain score and you're not able to cross that, an analysis like this is super, super useful. On the other hand, let's look at Ramin here. Okay, I'm just going to scroll past all of this. An average student spends about 70 seconds per question on English and 80 seconds per question on math. Now, you could have actually spent only 40 seconds on a question and just moved on. So I am not going to flag anything which is high, that is lower than 120 seconds in either math or English. But look at these numbers just look okay. Even this 128 looks okay. And then comes, hang on, I was just trying to find, give me 1 second. I was just trying to find something here. Yes, this is what. So I was talking about Alicia. So again, look at these. These numbers just look fine to me. But then look at these: form, sense, and structure. Three questions which are significantly, they're easy and medium, they're all correct, but the numbers are through the roof: 194, 233, and 160. If I add this together, this is about 8 to 9 minutes. There are 32 minutes on the SAT section 1. The students have spent 9 minutes on 3 questions out of 27 questions. This shows me two things. One, there is a strategy error, because even though she's gotten them correct, she's taken a lot of time. And because she's taken time over here, this will feed into her timing error. So this is also a very typical example of a strategy and a timing error. And then let's look at Ramin here. Ramin here is if you look at rhetorical synthesis here, she spent the same amount. Look at this. These are three questions in rhetorical synthesis: hard, medium, medium. She's actually spent less time on hard and more time on easy and medium. So when you have different types of times that are spent on the same kind of questions, this is a very typical timing error, right? So it's very important that if you want to get to the perfect 1600 or whatever score that you aspire to get into, it's important that you identify whether your error is a strategy error, whether it's a knowledge error, whether it's a timing error, or whether you're just anxious. Until otherwise you identify the core basic of this, it is going to be very hard for you to kind of scale your score, and you just keep doing more mock papers. It's not going to help you. Okay, now moving on with the next part of the presentation, I just wanted to show this to you. Is my screen visible? I think it is, yeah. Okay, perfect. So let's move on. All right. So now a lot of people come back and ask us, oh, but we should just go and do tutoring. Is tutoring effective for everything? What I wanted to do to make this presentation more effective is I wanted to categorize where is it that tutoring would actually be the most effective for you. The two places where tutoring is very, very effective is strategy gap and knowledge gap. Why? Because in strategy gap, when you have test taking frameworks and decision making strategies, the expected outcome is faster decisions, fewer trap answers, and better execution. This will not take you more than 10 to 20 hours. Any strategy can be taught in this time frame. A knowledge gap is where you are lacking the knowledge that is required, so you require content instruction, topic remediation, foundation building. This would typically take you anywhere between 20 to 50 hours depending on what your diagnostic score is. The outcome expected is stronger mastery and sustained growth. The third one, where the tutoring is the least, I mean, the second least impactful, is the timing gap. Here you need less tutoring hours and more self-study hours, wherein you are practicing more, you're pacing yourself, your drills are fine, you're trying to identify if the timing is resulting for strategy or knowledge and taking it forward. And the least one, if you are somebody with anxiety gap, then you should go for anxiety coaching. But what is required is basically a simulated environment, performance coaching, and confidence building. Here you would require the least number of coaching hours, and what you need is actually doing the test like the real test in a real testing environment. What this will kind of result into is improved confidence and test day performance. So yes, if you identify yourself as somebody who's lacking strategy and knowledge, please go ahead and look at somebody. But if you identify as somebody who is timing or anxiety, there are better ways to improve than looking for just coaching. So again, final thought on this before we move on: the most valuable question that a counselor or a parent can ask, or you can ask yourself, is not what score did you get, but what is preventing you from getting a higher score. That's where the real opportunity for growth lies. Now I want to comment on something which is super important and would be very useful to somebody who's coming right here: is what is the ideal time to prepare, or when is the ideal time to start preparing for the SAT? If you see this red arrow here, which is the summer between the 10th and the 11th grade, or the sophomore and the junior year, is when people start preparing. Our assessment is that somebody should actually start preparing at somewhere in the middle of their 10th grade, which is about September or October of their sophomore year. Why do we say this? Because, in your junior year, activities are peaking, college visits begin, students have fewer opportunities left, and AP workload is improving. To do this better, what we did is we actually put this on a graph and substantiated it. Out of our database, about 63.25% of students who have gotten their dream score began, their test prep in the December of the sophomore year. So, how should you go about doing it? Simply put, the first thing you should do is, let's say, around September or October of your sophomore year, you can take a diagnostic test, see where you're standing, assess where you're standing. If you can do it earlier, nothing like it, right? Your first try just to see where you're standing can fall in the March of your sophomore year, wherein you can do it through your school day or outside of school testing. We call it the getting your feet wet attempt, right? It may be completely prepared attempt, it may be a not completely prepared attempt, but if you can do it, your first prepared attempt should lie in May or June of your sophomore year. What this would do is, you're completely prepared. Let's say your goal is 1500, you started at a 1250. By May or June, I guarantee you, with this prep plan, you will reach a 1400, 1400, 1420, right, in that score range. Then you can break if you are taking the AP exams or the final exams. And in the summer, where the rest of the world is actually starting the prep for SAT, you can get into deep practice. You can get into mastery. You can solve many, many mock test papers. You can look at the errors, categorize what kind of errors you're making, go and do additional resources out of that, and take your next attempt in either the August, September, October, November, December of your junior year. What this would do is you would have multiple attempts to the SAT in the junior year. In the first half of your junior year, your SAT will be done and dusted, and early score unlocks time for senior years for essay helps and application. We also vetted this out with our database. So we tested about 2,000 students from the EduFit database, right? And we thought that, if you were to take your first attempt in May, June, uh, you know, or your first prepared attempt in May, June, the chances of you scoring higher are the most. So, what we did is we looked at the average scores that the students got, and we realized that the highest average score was in the month of June, and the lowest, average score that the students got was actually in the month of August. The key assumptions here, when we picked, not key assumptions, the key data points that we put in mind were that the average diagnostic score was 1100. They had completed 50 hours of tutoring with EduFit and 30 hours of self study, solved an average of 10 full length tests, and they were all first time test takers. Thus, feeding that, if you start studying, in your sophomore year, you can actually take your first prepared try in May, June, and generally score higher if you're a first time test taker. The August will definitely yield you better results if you're a second time test taker versus a first time test taker. And this is something that we have collated with our data points. We also took insights from Reddit. So we looked at about 1570 reported students from 2024 on Reddit, and we saw that the average SAT score for the month of October was 1030, for the month of March was 1174, and for the month of June was 1189. So, 28% of our students, even from the edge of a database, only needed a 50-point boost, who actually needed only a 50-point boost, scored lower on the August retake attempt, even after putting 20 additional hours. So yes, if you start your prep early in sophomore and take your first prepared try, if of course time permits you in May or June, you have the highest possibility of getting a ideal score, like the highest possible score. The last topic for today is, how many SAT mock tests should a student be taking? And this is a question that I get a lot. Parents say, hey, I've done X or Y or 20 or 40 or I don't know what else, right? In my opinion, the ideal number of tests a student should be taking is 11 to 14. And why do I say so? Because what I've done is I've divided these tests into three phases. Test phase one is test 1 to 5, which is what we call as setting the zone. So let's assume you've done all your core curriculum, you're done with all your strategy sessions, you understand how the SAT looks like. Yet in the first 5 tests, you will actually yourself calibrate your internal algorithm, right? You will build stamina, you will identify yourself, strengths and weaknesses in a timed fashion. You will learn about your pacing. You will know, oh, I wasted too much time here, I should let it go. You will establish realistic score targets. So test 1 to 5 is setting the zone. Test 6 to 10 is actually the rise zone, right? This is where the content gaps are addressed, strategy improves, timing gets better. And my experience tells me that for every test you take, you will get a rise of anywhere between 20 to 40 points on the SAT. So let's say if you're a 1200, after the first 5 tests, the fifth, sixth, the sixth test would be like a 1230, then a 1260, and then a 1290. Usually around the test 11 to 14, you will plateau out, meaning you will get a certain score and it will be in that range where you actually get your realistic score. So if you do 14 number of tests, you are prepared enough to take the real test. You will see the outcome that replicates the real test. And of course, these are enough number of tests. If you prepare this well in advance, you're good to go. This also works beautifully if you are somebody who's a rising senior and needs about 100 points rise. You can actually use 14 and that should be good to go. Of course, the assumption here is after every 2 to 3 tests, you're sitting down with whoever, your parent or your tutor or your teacher, and identifying your areas of challenges. If you don't identify that, that is going to be a problem. Test prep strategy, again, I mentioned start in the sophomore year to be early, but at least a summer before your junior year. Solve at least 12 to 14 adaptive test papers, learn and calibrate, have a focused test prep plan. Other than that, I finished earlier than what I promised, which is about 15 minutes early. These are my, if you need to, follow me on Instagram or YouTube or my community, that's that. I am now going to leave some time to address any and all questions. I think there are plenty here. So, now's a good time to kind of put questions and I will try to answer each one of them for you.
Thank you so much, Rima. That was really, really informative. Very data driven too. I thought it was great. I see some questions just to start to kind of moderate them. One thing that I think is on a lot of students' mind is how do you choose between the SAT versus the ACT? Like, obviously, you focused on the SAT today, but how do you make that choice initially?
Okay, so this is what I'm going to give away. Thank you so much for bringing out that question because it's a great question. I have shared this with everybody, right? It is a 10 question planner that will help you decide if you're a better SAT student or a better ACT student. But if you think, you want to really get to the bottom of it, the ideal way to go about doing this is take a diagnostic test for the SAT, take a diagnostic test for the ACT, and have somebody, anybody, right, Edufit or somebody else, just compare these two scores for you and see where you stand better. If you do better at SAT, if you stand better at ACT, figure that out and kind of make the choice. If you want a quicker turnaround time, just use this, answer the questions towards the end of it. It will show you if you're a stronger SAT candidate, stronger ACT candidate, or both.
Thanks. That's really helpful. I think that'll be super useful for our students. Other questions just about like, having certain score goals. Like I see one that's someone stuck at 600 points and wants to take it in December, and then I see another student just about, aiming to increase their score over a couple months. Do you have any like obviously these are things you could address in your own sort of conversations with students, but like, do you have any broad advice for um basically like setting realistic goals and timelines and how much time do you think it's reasonable to expect and what goals are reasonable to set?
Hmm. So I think I'll answer your question in two parts. One is we need to understand what is your starting score, right? Like I see
Mhm.
somebody who said my starting score is a 1050. Ideally
Yes.
speaking, if you are starting at 1050, then you would, and if your goal is let's say a 1500 plus, you will need 3 tries because an average rise in the score up until you reach 1400 is about 150 to 200 points
Mhm.
per attempt that you take for the SAT. And when I say per attempt, it's a prepared attempt. So let's say, the 1050 will possibly go to a 1250 in the first try, and then it will possibly go to a 1400 in the second try. The moment you hit that 1400, 1420 mark, what we call it in the SAT world is you've hit the high inertia zone, right? So now to move the needle, you really have to get down to what kind of errors you're making, right? And what is a realistic timeline. So if you are at say 1420, 1430, then to reach a 1500 plus, I would say you could need anywhere between 1 to 2 tries. So ideally speaking, for somebody starting at 1,000 as a standard rule of thumb, in the ballpark of thousands to 1100s, you should account for 3 attempts. If you're starting at a 1200, you should account for 2 attempts. If you're starting at a 1300 to a 1400, again 2 attempts, depending on how high an inertia zone you are in. But ideally 2 to 3 tries is good to go. Four, I rarely see somebody take. I think it's not worth it if you're taking 4 tries. All you're doing is SAT through the year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that was a really thorough answer, and especially thank you for sort of blending the specific question with a more general approach. I think that's great. In terms of like, I guess my next question is, when is it, when do you stop? I feel like that's hard to say. Like, how do you, how do you know that you've prepared the most that you can? Like when, if you're aiming for a certain target, maybe not quite getting there, how do you make a determination of like when to keep studying and keep preparing and when to sort of accept that this is the score that you're going to have?
Okay, so this would depend on two things. Number one is what is the major you're aiming for?
Hmm.
Okay, because if you're aiming at something like a BSMD, you're not going to make the cut until you get 1550. Let's be honest about it. There are 50 schools in the entire United States of America that offer a BSMD program. So if that is your goal, you got to, not stop till you get a 1550. But if you are somebody who is not very, like, reputation conscious, oh, I want to go to the top schools or whatever, I think a good data point would be to look at the common data sets that are offered by, that are available to the public, and you can see what was the average SAT score that was, kind of accepted. And if you are around that average SAT score, I think you're good to go. Like, it's a good benchmark to stop and not waste any more time. The second and the only reason you should stop is if you determine that, like, I recently had a student who said, I am a bad test taker. That is it. Like, I just can't do anything more. If that is the case, and you accepted that you're a bad test taker, there's no point kind of, breaking your head on this, because you may be a great student, but you're not a good test taker. It's better to accept that and move on and stop over there and aim at colleges that see you beyond those test scores.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Another question just kind of generally that comes to mind. What are some common mistakes that students make when they're preparing for the SAT or even taking the test itself?
In the sense subject wise, or in the sense of the general one?
I would say maybe less so like the academics, but more about like the preparation strategy and approach to it.
Absolutely. So I think in English, the most important thing that students miss out is that the SAT or the ACT, and whatever I'm answering also applies to the ACT, by the way, right? Even though I focused on SAT on today's presentation, but the SAT or the ACT English is unlike any high school English you have ever studied. Whether you are in US high school, whether you are in some, random country doing IB, SAT and ACT English is different. Most likely, the answers that sound correct are incorrect, answers that sound correct are incorrect, and the ones that sound incorrect are actually incorrect. So, biggest advice for English is focus on strategies. The answer that the strategies will give you are the correct ones, and let strategies override your intuition. English is not intuitive. Think about it. On the SAT and the ACT, they're telling you can replace a full stop with a semicolon. That's a rule, legit. If we wanted to replace a full stop with a semicolon, why did we have two punctuations? The English made two punctuations, but the SAT says these are not two different punctuations; they are the same. So until you know this rule, you will go, wrong about it. The second thing, which is from the perspective of math, is learn to be thorough with Desmos. About 85% of your SAT math can be solved using Desmos. So if you are thorough with your Desmos, there is no way under the sun you will miss math. The focus should not be on understanding the concept for math. The focus should be on learning Desmos. If you get these two things straight, I promise you, anywhere between 1450 to 1550 is something that you can very easily aim.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. How do you fit, I mean, obviously the test is very important. How do you fit that sort of into the overall application strategy though? Like what would you recommend? Like is it just based on like the target scores for the universities you're applying to? How do you sort of integrate that? Like, or how would you recommend integrating that into an overall sort of approach?
Absolutely. So it's first of all, it's very important that why do you really need the test score? Okay.
Hmm.
If you need it for a merit-based scholarship, it's important that you go to the school of your choice and see at what level you would require that scholarship at. Like at what score you can get it. What I can do is I can actually share a link with you, Kevin. I don't have it handy right now, wherein all you need to do is build your list, put in your SAT score and your GPA, and you can actually look at the financial aid, like the merit-based aid that the colleges offer you at that SAT or ACT score. So to be able to get that aid, if that is a need, the SAT score kind of becomes important. If you are aiming at more competitive majors, right, like BSMD or engineering or STEM based, those definitely require the SAT. So, not having an SAT for those kind of majors will definitely be, you will be at a disadvantage. And last but not least, in terms of the SAT, if you're aiming at a school with a major that doesn't require the SAT, like for example, if you're going to Purdue for studying psychology, you may not require SAT. So, where does SAT sit in the bigger scheme of things depends on how much aid or merit you need, which major you're looking at, and which is the school that considers SAT at the highest level. Like, for example, if it's test required, it means it's required. They need it, right? But something like a UIUC, which says we're test optional, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I'm saying this because I saw a couple of people tuning in from Chicago. They have a very clear direct that if you're aiming for engineering, they need SAT scores, even though they are test optional, and they need a one sitting score. You cannot super score it. So, depending on the university and the major and the need of an aid, the importance of SAT lies. If you are somebody who cannot do SAT but still wants to go for STEM field, maybe you may not get into Ivies, but there are plenty of other schools, in the United States of America that offer great STEM programs without having the SAT. So make sure you look at the common data set. It gives you a very good idea in terms of, how and where.
Great. Absolutely. No, that's super helpful. I guess it looks like I think we've summarized a lot of the questions. I guess my last major question that I like to ask everybody who presents for us is just like if you had one piece of advice, especially for seniors who are applying and maybe have limited time, like what would it be kind of in regard to taking the SAT?
One piece of advice, huh? That's a nice question. So if I had one piece of advice for students who are doing the senior year right now, sit and evaluate if you really think SAT is a key piece for your admissions. It's almost senior year, it's application time. In the next 2 months, 2 odd months, you will be submitting in 2 or 3 months, you'll be submitting in turning in your applications. So do it only and only if it is a necessity. If you think you can bypass the SAT and, kind of get into your dream school, do that for senior years. For the sophomores year, I'm going to add in, please start. Do not wait until when you turn juniors. If you're already juniors, I think it's high time you kind of get into it and kind of get sorted with it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rima. We'll be sharing this recording along with your contact information as well. Everybody who's considering SAT and ACT prep, please do get in touch. The score determiner, I think we had. Do you want to just
I
put
will
that in the
share them
chat?
again right now. So there
Yes,
is,
that would be great. And we can share that in the follow-up as well.
of course. So this is one, And then this is the decision. So the decision maker is the one which says SAT versus ACT.
Hmm.
And then there's Quizmaster Interactive, which gives you a score range determiner for your SAT. That's something that both of these are put on the chat right now.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, everyone take a second and save those as well. But yeah, definitely, check out Rima's services. They're, very, very comprehensive presentation. Thank you so much for all the insights and best of luck to everyone taking the SAT in a few weeks.
Thank you for having me over, Kevin. I truly appreciate it. I hope it was, useful to everybody who attended this webinar, and hopefully it is useful to people who watch this as well on a replay. I try
Yes,
to make this as easy to grasp but informative as I can, so that students can take key takeaway actions and get on with their prep.
amazing. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great night, and thanks again, Rima.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye bye.